conferences, we went really in depth into talking about terrain. It was in relationship to cancer, but it doesn't matter whether it's cancer or anything else. Ultimately, the way that we heal any kind of problem, but particularly a digestive problem, is we change the terrain. And that's hugely impacted by our diet. So the GAPS diet is really focusing on shifting our terrain. And what I'm finding is that many people who are doing the GAPS diet hit some really challenging points in their process, which makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have a lot of toxins and they're going to have to get out somehow. And generally when the toxins leave the body, there's discomfort in the body to some degree, depending upon wherever our weakest points are. So people will have a period of, maybe flu-like symptoms or tiredness, or maybe their bowel will really flare up for a little while, or something as the toxins are leaving. And if we can work deeper into the terrain, I like to think of probiotics in many ways like seeds, and we're putting these, wonderful, beautiful, healthy seeds into the soil. And over time it will make a difference. But if you build the soil first, then it's going to make a huge difference when you put the seeds in. They're going to grow beautifully. And, it might take, doing cover crops for 3 or 4 seasons before the soil gets rebuilt again. But if you build the soil first, from right off the bat, you're going to see some really remarkable results with the seeds going in and the whole shift that can make in the system. So I see the GAPS diet in many ways as terrain affecting, but really focusing on the seed level. And I'm doing a very major process right now with going in deeper to the microorganisms in the soil. Our bodies, by count, are cellularly, 90% of all the cells in the body are microorganisms and only 10% are human cells. So we are profoundly influenced by the state of the soil. If you were to take some rich, beautiful soil and look at it under a microscope, it's going to be loaded with microorganisms. You look at sand, or you look at, soil from a desert, there's going to be potential for microorganisms when it rains, but it doesn't happen very often. So what we need to do is really, support the microorganisms, but the diet is profound. So what I'd like to know is what you've done so far with the GAPS diet and what you feel has happened for you and what your understanding is, because honestly, what you have looked at the websites a lot, so that's really helpful. But everybody who's ever read the books say they can't believe that anybody's tried to do the diet without having the book. And since the videos have come out, they can't believe that anybody does it without the videos. And even, most of us who were in the classes with Dr. McBride, the video had not come out yet. And when we saw the video, we almost all fell off our chairs because we all interpreted what she said and how to make things based on our own experience, but it wasn't what she meant. So we were all making things differently than what they were in the videos. Do you know what I'm saying?
I can imagine.
I was flabbergasted. It was like, oh my God.
Was it more, when you saw the video, was it more easier?
Oh, it was very simple.
Than what you guys...
It was very much simpler than we thought it was. It was, it was just like, oh my God. Because I actually was already talking with the camera crew about doing videos to show people how to make stuff. And I'm so glad I didn't, because I would have been showing them how to make things not in the exact way that she would have wanted to see them done. Granted they were good, but what she was doing was simpler. So they've done a beautiful job. If you've read Natasha's work, then you know that the foundation of her work is something called the introductory diet. And there's 5 phases in the introductory diet. And in the book, it kind of makes it sound like you have to do, phase 1 and then phase 2, and if you can't get through phase 2, you stick with that until you can, and then you go to phase 3, but that's not always the way it works. We're all unique and different, and some of us can't eat some of the foods that are in the different phases, and we have to jump over, and it also depends on your blood sugar levels and all sorts of things as to whether you're going to even start with the introductory diet or not. So it's really much more complicated than she made in the book as far as doctors go and figuring out how to set it up so that's going to work for you. But it's very much a process of trial and error and really being in communication with one another. I always tell my clients, if you don't tell me you're having a problem, how can I help you? So I really encourage telephone calls. I personally dislike spending any more time than I have to in front of a computer, and I'm spending more time all the time. But I do encourage people to call, because first of all, the element of voice has so much more in it than our typing on the computer, of ourselves. And you can feel so much of the other person, when you hear their voice, and their emotions are a huge part of our healing process, and we hear and feel that through the voice. Yeah. So there's a lot to it. But back to you, honey. Where are you now with your program?
Actually, I haven't started at all with the GAPS diet protocol. This is, I had heard about, I read about Natasha Campbell McBride a year ago when I was doing my search in my thyroid, my Hashimoto's. I did come across her diet, her protocol, but it all makes sense to me. The gut, your digestion is a big part of your health, and I seem to think that's connected to my Hashimoto's.
It's connected to everything.
Yeah, that's why I have the disease, but I didn't want to do it on my own. I wanted to, if I do start on something like this, because this isn't something, it doesn't sound simple to me. So I wanted to be sure that I was monitored if I was to start this. And that's why I looked into your website and gave you a call. And, once I do that, maybe I can start on that.
It would be great, Rachel. Yeah, and I just want to tell you that so many people look at autoimmune disease as something that you're going to have for the rest of your life. That's not my experience at all. And I'm really surprised too, because I've done so many courses on Hashimoto's going back like 10 years now, and some doctors say that you shouldn't have any iodine, and other doctors say that iodine's really important, and there's all of these very differing opinions, but all of them seem to agree, other than Natasha and some of the work that I just did, that once you have Hashimoto's, that's the way it is forever. But when you begin to understand a little bit about what the thyroid really is and what we do unknowingly that's so harmful to it, you can understand how, if indeed every cell in our body is replaced within 7 years, and I'm not sure how much time it takes for all the cells in the thyroid to be replaced, if we change what we're doing and that affects the thyroid, then we're going to have a new thyroid that doesn't necessarily have Hashimoto's any longer. And the whole idea of Hashimoto's, or any autoimmune disease, is that the body's attacking some specific tissue. And there's a lot of researchers now that are really beginning to question that whole paradigm of that the body's attacking itself. What's actually really going on here might be something other than that. And I'm really open to that being the case. Like, for instance, most people don't realize that the thyroxine and the different components of the secretions of the thyroid are very soap-like. And they are broken down a lot by essential fatty acids. So using things that we think are really good for us, like lots of nuts and seeds and fish oils even, could actually break down that soap even more. And we're probably a lot better off using coconut oil and coconut flour than eating a lot of nuts and taking a lot of fish oils. And everybody seems to say that we all need to take fish oils and we all need to take vitamin D, and even Natasha is really strong on that. But I'm really willing to explore through clinical numbers, through testing, to see if actually that is indeed the best thing for you or not. And I'm not willing to just say, well, Rachel is a person with Hashimoto's. I'd much rather say Rachel is Rachel. Let's explore what's going on in her body, in her overall balances, in the way that her systems are functioning. And if we can support that and coming back into balance, will we see a change in what's going on in her organs, which I believe happens very directly, very clearly.
I've heard that. So that's what I'm hoping.
Oh, that's the arena I want to work in. And I believe that Natasha's really got something fabulous, that the GAPS diet is wonderful, but each person is going to do well with different sorts of proteins, for instance, based on the purine content. And she says a lot of people can't eat nuts, but she doesn't really know why they can't eat nuts, and I think I understand why they can't now. Because of a basic imbalance called a catabolic imbalance that they have. And if they were anabolic, they'd be able to eat some, but not nearly as many as she's recommending. It's not that she's recommending people eat a lot of nuts, but she is saying to use nuts as the foundation of your breads and things like that.
Right.
And I think the big piece that most of us have to deal with when we're switching over to a GAPS diet, and she does talk about this, I think, very, very cogently in her books and in her website and everything else, is the whole arena of when we don't have healthy gut flora, we can't break down our foods effectively.
Yes.
And when that happens, we're not going to fully break down our glutens and our starches. Now, she recognizes that all of our starches are large molecules, very difficult to break down, the hardest to break down for the body. So that's why she's saying to not eat starches. And there's others, like Cyrex Labs, incredible lab that does the most conclusive testing that I've found for gluten intolerance. They look at 12 different proteins in gluten. It's really incredible. And so many people who will show like they don't have a problem with gliadin have the worst forms of gluten intolerance to deaminized gluten and maybe even the wheat germ oils and things like that. Those are can be 10 times more devastating to the body than a gliadin form of intolerance. But what happens oftentimes is what we call cross-reactivity. And yeah, so what happens is we can have the same reaction to, once you have a gluten intolerance, to rice, to coffee, to chocolate, to potatoes, to yams, to almost every grain. And so it all works out the same. I don't really care what they say is the reason. But the bottom line is, if we knock the starches out of our diet, then we're most likely going to have a much easier chance of rebuilding the health of the digestive system. And it doesn't have to be forever, but we do need to monitor it so that, and she says 2 years for the average person to really, really give the system what it needs to fully rebuild itself. I feel that if we work with something called SANMs from Germany, which work at the soil level, and something called drainage remedies that help the body be more effective at gently and deeply releasing toxins, that we can get there a lot faster. But honestly, honey, for myself, even though, I'm a long-time Western pricer, Western prices work, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, even though I'm a long-time Weston Pricer and I know about soaking grains and making your own homemade sourdough, and I used to bake all my own bread and grind my own grains, and it was a big thing. I mean, I made bread every week before there were bread makers and, you know, all that kind of stuff. I really don't think I want to eat grains anymore for the rest of my life. You know, I mean, it might show up every now and again when I'm visiting a friend once I feel like my gut is completely restored. But it doesn't make sense to me anymore to put phytic acid into my body. And it doesn't make sense to me anymore to support big agribusiness that's got their grains siloing for 3 years, filled with mold and ratchet and, you know, cockroach parts, and it doesn't appeal to me. When I'm in India, I'll probably eat rice again because they take their rice from thrashing it directly to the market. And it's fresh. You know, it's a totally different thing. And they do realize how hard it is to digest. So whenever you eat any Indian food, it's loaded with digestive spices. And usually, if, you know, now they're starting to eat horrible oils too, but for thousands of years, it was just, you know, ghee and butter that they used for the oils that they cooked everything in.
Right.
And that helps to balance the sugar imbalances that one gets from working with the grains. So the fats help to make that a lot easier to absorb and digest and not cause insulin resistance and all the problems that we normally have.
I've been gluten-free now for over a year.
Good for you.
But I recall Natasha saying that doesn't, you know, if you're gluten-free, there's still something wrong.
It's
Why
not
you
enough.
Can't, yeah.
It's not enough.
So
Go ahead.
is that
That's what I found with most people.
right?
You know, there are a handful of people who may have had parents who weren't themselves loaded with antibiotics.
That's me.
So your
Yes.
parents didn't have any antibiotics?
No, they weren't heavy. I mean, I took a lot of antibiotics.
Okay.
I used to get a lot of UTIs.
Uh-huh.
I used to get them 3 times a year.
So you tend to be
And I
anabolic.
had sinus infections back to back. So I've been on antibiotics for, oh gosh, many years.
Okay.
So, which they say is a big,
Oh, that's the primary cause.
right.
It is. It just,
It kills your,
the good guys.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
The way that I explain it to people and the way I've come to understand it, and this is more of a German and Swiss and point of view from Belgium as well, is that every organism has a range from healthy to really ready to be broken down. Okay? So we know that E. coli lives in our guts and it really helps us digest things. But if you get what we call a high valence form of E. coli, it will make you deathly ill. So what's the difference between a low valence and a high valence? It has to do with the terrain. And the terrain has everything to do with what you're eating, it has to do with your emotional state, it has to do with your pH, it has to do with your oxygenation, it has to do with the electrical components of your body. All those different things. And that's the kind of stuff I test. And most people think, well, pH is everything. But pH is the end product of 5 systems being in balance, if it's a healthy pH. So underneath that are the systems that we need to work with. You know, how is our autonomic nervous system functioning? How is our body dealing with breaking down and building up as catabolic, anabolic? How is our body dealing with breaking down foods? You know, can we burn carbohydrates well? Do we burn them too fast? You know, what's happening with fat? Can we burn fat? You know, have we not eaten fat for so long that our whole, you know, gallbladder is so out of control and our bile is so not working?
right.
And the other thing that most people don't think about is that there's a rhythm and a time frame in our digestion. So, for instance, when we first eat, we need our stomach acid to be extremely acid. We want it to be at like 2.0 if possible. Most of us are closer to 4. When it's at 2.0, we can really break down our proteins. We can really break down our minerals so that they can be completely absorbed. And minerals are coenzymes for every organ in the body. When we really are acidic, there's no parasites that can make it through the stomach. No amoebas, no anything. I mean, people have been exposed to parasites forever. They didn't have the hygiene that we have. And it wasn't a problem for 2 reasons. One is that they didn't have the terrain that fed the parasites, so the parasites would come in and they would just die because there was nothing for them to eat. It wasn't acidic enough for them to live in there. And the other is that their hydrochloric acid was strong enough. So many of us, and she recognizes this too, really needs to do a hydrochloric acid therapy. So if one has a tendency to bloat, particularly upper, when your clothes are tighter in the evening than they are in the morning, if one has a tendency to burp or belch or, eructate, then you can be certain that you don't have enough hydrochloric acid. And if you have a tendency to have gas and flatulence, then you can be certain that you don't have enough bile.
Bile?
Gallbladder support. But the bile is very alkaline, and of course the hydrochloric acid is very acid. And what happens is that about 2 hours after you eat, bile and pancreatic enzymes that are both very alkaline are released into the small intestine area. It's right at the end of the stomach and the beginning of the small intestine. And it causes a sizzle, and it helps everything to be digested and broken down. So a lot of people will take their bile salts at the same time as they take their enzymes, totally neutralizing the benefits of their hydrochloric acid.
Interesting. I have that problem where I feel bloated in the evening, gas, burping.
Right. So honey, that's how we can help to upregulate and rebuild the system. By working with, I have some really special hydrochloric acid. I actually have very, very cheap betaine hydrochloric acid. And then I have a special formulation that I want everybody to take with the betaine if you need that much.
Is it a pill form?
Yeah, they're pills. Yeah. And one of them has all these things that support your body in producing your own hydrochloric acid. And that's in the, what we call HCl plus. And then the other is just betaine hydrochloric acid, and those are 550 milligram tablets where there's only 100 milligrams of betaine in the other HCl, but the rest is all these different herbs and things that support your stomach in producing its own hydrochloric acid. So we have you test it first. I'm one of those people who could eat almost 25 hydrochloric acids and still not feel a burn. But the way that you know when you have enough is that you feel a warming sensation in your stomach. And I'm down to the point now where I'm taking 550 milligram tablets and 200 milligram tablets at every meal. But it's made the hugest difference. My Jonathan and I would just laugh because when he first met me, you could hear my belly across the room. And that had been for years. I mean, I just knew that was the way it was going to be. It was gurgling and swishing in the water. It's not like that anymore. And I really believe it's a combination of working with this terrain-oriented physiological stuff, the work out of Belgium and out of Switzerland and Germany, where we're working with building the terrain with actually homeopathics of the microorganisms, the low valences of the microorganisms, to rebuild the digestive system, and doing the GAPS diet. I think it's an incredible marriage. And there also are fabulous things to do to support your body in its constant drainage. It's constantly being open to release toxins. And one of those is to be doing things like castor oil packs over your digestive system. For some of us, do you have a tendency towards constipation or loose stool?
Yes, I do.
Both?
I do have both.
And is one stronger than the other?
to say constipation.
Okay. I thought so when you told me you had UTIs.
I used to,
Mhm.
yes.
Because when the fluid is, instead of going out the bowel, it's going out the urethra, and it tends to concentrate. And oftentimes people will find that they have not a lot of urine, but they have to go often. Is that what happened to you?
Yeah, and I had
Then it would be very concentrated, and it would have very acidic,
right.
and it would burn, and it would
I had the urge, but
hardly anything would come.
exactly.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the burning
Yeah.
on occasions.
It's classic, and Natasha talks a lot about it because so many of the children with autism have that, and they have difficulty in not wetting the bed at night because the irritation of the urethra from this concentrated, high-density urine that creates a beautiful environment for pathogenic bacteria to grow in. So that's an anabolic imbalance. And if we shifted you more catabolic, that wouldn't happen anymore.
It's funny because I had a hysterectomy about 10 years ago. I had a partial. After I had my surgery, I was getting less and less
UTIs.
And I haven't had one since 2009. So it's been over 3 years since I haven't had a UTI.
So honey, do you have your ovaries
I
or,
have my ovaries.
and they removed your
They
uterus?
removed my uterus.
Yeah, so you were probably growing a lot of bacteria in the uterus. Another thing people don't think about is they think, well, okay, I have, a bladder, and I have, intestines, and I have a small intestine and a colon, and then I have my female genitalia. But do you realize how packed they are together in the same location?
Oh, I'm sure.
They're so affected by each other. I mean, really, it's all those organs are in,
Right here.
yeah, in this small area.
It's like, it's very long, right?
Oh yeah, it's extremely long. Your small intestines are,
Isn't it like,
I don't remember the exact amount, it's like 30, 40 feet long. And the villi, which are the little, it's quite amazing, especially if you get the book. There's these adorable pictures that she made of these little villi with hairs, coming off their heads. If you look at an electron microscope, the hairs are so densely packed that they almost look like a woolly mammoth. They're just, like there's no room in between at all. But she has these pictures of these happy ones with lots of hairs on their heads and little dots. And those little dots are enzymes that are on the hairs. And then she has sad ones who have very few little hairs and hardly any enzymes. And the whole idea is that when they're tightly packed together, we have what we call tight junctions. But when they're not tightly packed together, we have loose junctions, and toxins are able to escape from the colon of foods that have not been fully digested into the bloodstream. And when that happens, they oftentimes will attach to different organ tissues, or they'll attach to something else that's floating through the blood. And the body gets confused, especially when it attaches to organs, and it sends its white blood cells or its red blood cells or its immune system fighters to be on the search for irregular cells to destroy them. And that's why it starts destroying your own tissue.
okay.
That's the basic, that's a very simplified version of, how it all works. So the bottom line is we need to make sure that you have tight junctions again. And there are certain things that really support that process. And the most important of them all is a diet of high sterols, of saturated fats. And it's the absolute opposite, of course, of what we've all been told. But if you're a Weston Price person, you know a lot about that and why that's supposed to be. 90 years ago when people were still eating real butter and they didn't have vegetable oils to eat, and there was so little heart attacks that people would come from 100 miles around if somebody had one to see what it was. And it wasn't even listed as a medical pathology in medical texts. I think it was only added to medical texts 70 years ago. And it was right about the same time as the milling industry realized that if you take the wheat germ out of the grain, that's where the fat is. There's incredible sterols in wheat germ, but it takes about 10 days for those sterols to start ranciding. So if you take those sterols out, then the grain will last a lot longer, and it will smell good, and people will eat it. And they also realized if you take the bran off, see when a plant is growing, the minerals that are in the soil come up through the plant, but they're on the outside of the plant. So on the outside of the seed, the germ protects the inside of the seed with these minerals, which are in many ways like glass to insects and things, so they stay away. But they found that if they left the bran on, then the bread wouldn't rise and get soft. So if they took the bran off, which has all the minerals in it, and if they took the germ off, then they wouldn't have the rancidity problem, and then they'd have this long shelf life of their grain. Or they could make breads that would be light and fluffy. And that's why they did that, and that's when heart attacks started happening.
Interesting.
Because the sterols weren't there for people anymore. And they started working with, extruding products with high heat, and you know about all those wild stories. So, I mean, it's just...
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, we can really track this stuff to where they started saying butter's bad, eat margarine, because they could use these cheap oils that they didn't know what to do with, and, chemically extract them and sell them for, hundreds of times more than what it cost.
Exactly.
And people were making a fortune on this stuff, and we're the sad result where, what is it now? There's as many as 64% of all boys in certain parts of California that are autistic.
Yeah, I know it's growing. I know autism is growing.
It's crazy. The ADD numbers, the ADHD, the kids on Ritalin, the women who can't have children, the men who can't have children. And the Pottinger story about, I think it was like, what does it take, 5 generations till the cats weren't able to reproduce at all anymore?
Oh, I don't know about that story.
Oh, the Pottinger story is amazing. Dr. Price and Dr. Pottinger were contemporaries, and they both, believed a lot of the same things. And Dr. Pottinger fed cats raw milk and raw meat. He fed one group that, and the other group, cooked foods and things that are not natural to cats. And every generation of the cats that were eating the cooked foods and the foods that were not, their natural diet, their bone structure started to fall apart, their hair got less and less, and their emotional states got weaker and weaker, and they started dying of all kinds of diseases. And by the 5th generation, they were completely unable to procreate. They were emotional wrecks. Their brains weren't. Yeah. What are we seeing? Alzheimer's disease, infertility issues, ADD, ADHD, people who are just a mess emotionally. It's incredible, but it matches the Pottinger studies almost exactly. So that's why always it seemed, well, I don't know if that's why, but Dr. McBride always does these really deep intakes with people about their parents and their grandparents, and going back as far as one can find out about the health of their ancestors, and your aunts and uncles, and your great aunts and great uncles, and all of that, to see what are the genetic weaknesses that have been passed on. So in homeopathy we call it miasm, and it's a predisposition to weaknesses in certain areas based on the history of our ancestors.
Right. I think I have the genes. My parents are still both alive.
How old are they?
My dad just turned 8. Well, he'll be 81 in August.
Uh-huh.
And my mom will be 78 in April.
Mm-hmm. Are they on any meds for
My
anything?
dad has heart disease, but he's been able to control it. He takes
Is it high blood
medication.
pressure? Or?
Is it what?
High blood pressure? Or?
He doesn't have high blood pressure, but
Uh-huh.
he takes high blood pressure medication to something about the heart.
It'd be interesting to ask him, honey, about what exactly it is.
Yeah, he did tell me. I can't remember. My mom, she does have high blood pressure. She just started taking medication. Oh, probably not too long, early 70s, I believe.
If she's open, we could probably help her turn that around.
Yeah.
And your ethnicity?
I'm Filipina.
So did your parents eat, traditional Filipino food?
They do.
And were they were they born in the Philippines or born
They were
here?
born in the Philippines, yes.
How old were they when they came to the
They
States?
came here, well, I was 1 when they came here, so I believe my mom was 31, because we're 30 years, she had me at 30. My dad was early 30s also when he came here.
So they had a chance to actually probably eat real food for a while.
Yeah, in the Philippines?
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
They eat a lot of vegetables and fish.
Good. Yeah.
It's very, I've ate fish ever since I could remember. It's always been in our diet.
Do they do fish soups too?
Yes.
That's so good. So you had the bones and all of that.
Yes.
Good.
They still make it even today.
Good. Yeah, I love fish soup.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but my grandfather, which is my mom's dad, he lived, I believe, till he was 94.
That's great.
He didn't really have any health problems that I can recall, just arthritis, and he had high blood pressure. Her mom passed away with, she was in dialysis for about 5 years, and decided she didn't
Want to continue.
that. So she passed away shortly after they stopped dialysis. My dad's dad,
So that could be the weakness of your kidney, honey.
yeah, that could be, yeah. Well, is it hereditary, or is it just the way they,
It's everything.
is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's both. There are, tendencies to specific weaknesses, but then there's also even bigger, what we call epigenetics, which is what we do that'll affect whether that
Right, how
shows up or
their
not.
diet was, and
Right.
how they took care of their
Right. But even more how you deal with the weaknesses that you may have inherited. Because I inherited enormous amounts of weaknesses. And just to kind of give you an idea, what I mean is that my blood work traditional medical blood work looks incredibly beautiful. My A1C is great, my lipids are great, my thyroid panel is pretty shockingly good. And yet, when I do my work with the deeper stuff that I was telling you about, doing the urine and, saliva samples and things with the blood pressure and all that, my underlying body is so weak, it's unbelievable, but I know how to compensate for it. So I'm now starting to really work deeply with seeing if I can build that foundation. So I know how I've learned through the years to be really good with homeopathics and things like that, to compensate for all the things. Like one of my sisters has Crohn's disease and unbelievable IgA weaknesses to the point she can hardly go anywhere without getting sick. She's had one tumor after the other removed. The other sister is a type 2 diabetic and borderline personality, and heaven only knows what else, because she won't talk to me anymore. And
have they tried any? No?
are you kidding? I mean, if they did, it would be another story altogether. I mean, I'm their older sister, and I look 20 years younger than them. And I mean, I'm going to be 60 this year.
40, I've been doing this for 40 years. Well, let me see, you know how I'm counting.
Yeah, I know. I'll be 60 this year. And I just, I have...
You have very nice skin.
Oh, thank you, honey. But I mean, I have the energy of a 30-year-old, or better even.
That is awesome.
And I've had horrible arthritis and completely cleared it, to the point where I can mountain climb and I dance and I do yoga and, all those sorts of things. I get up at 5 in the morning and I'm just hit the ground running, and I have great energy.
Wow.
So, I've gotten real good at knowing how to live high quality life with unbelievable weaknesses. I was the sickliest of the family. The doctors told my folks when I was little that if they didn't get me to either Florida every winter, because we lived in Ohio, or California, that they would have $5,000 doctor bills a year, and that would be closer to $50,000 these days. You know, and so we moved to California, and I mean, just, I was a wreck. I lived on antibiotics, and I've turned it all around. I'm the only one in my family with a gallbladder. I'm the only one who hasn't had varicose veins stripped. You know, I mean, I'm the only one without any heart medications. I know one sister who has hearing aids. I don't know about the other. So, do you notice? Do you know what I'm saying? How you know, if we can, that's what we call epigenetics. So that's what we're talking about with your, was it your great aunt who had the grandmother? Okay, who was on dialysis.
Yes.
You can definitely, if you know what you're doing, prevent having kidney problems.
Okay.
You just have to be smart about it and understand what we need to do. And that's where that deeper level terrain testing comes in.
Now, is heart attacks also genetic, or is that just the lifestyle of that?
Well, one could actually have a gene for problems with, you know, with the heart. But I think the heart is very, very deeply affected by our lifestyle. But also, you know, if you listen to the podcast I did last week, I was with women who had cancer, and we talked a lot about emotional impact. The kidney deals with fear, and the bladder, especially infections, has to do with suppressed being pissed off.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, so you might, I mean, UTIs are being pissed off. So you might want to look at what was going on for you during that time, and if you felt like you couldn't really express, you know, how upset you were about certain things in your life, and or you were just plain upset about things in your life, whether you expressed it or not.
Holding things in.
That's particularly challenging for the body. We're designed to release. So I'll give you the paradigm around releasing, honey. There's a whole area that I've been working in for about 20 years called biotherapeutic drainage. It comes out of Belgium. And this work has been around for almost 100 years now. Maybe it is 100. It's profound, and it's based on looking at how effectively we release. And those people who release really well are not sick. They, if they contact some kind of intense bacteria that they're unable to deal with, you know, in any other way, what they'll do is they'll get 103 to 105 fever. They'll, you know, have the chills and whatnot, and they'll be sick for 24 hours. Everything will come out. They'll sweat like crazy. They'll get diarrhea. You know, they'll be urinating like horses, and their bedclothes will be soaked. They might vomit and get it all out of their system in 24 hours, and then they're stronger and healthier afterwards. Do you know it's almost impossible to see anybody spike any more than 102 fever these days? Because we've weakened our immune systems to such a degree that we don't know how to release anymore. So those are the healthiest people. And that would be, okay, so that would
be my sister.
Oh, and by the way, they also don't hold on to anything emotionally.
That's
So
my sister.
if they're upset, they will just completely you know.
Yeah. She's confrontational.
They'll be right in your face.
Yeah, speaks her mind. Yeah.
But they're also very quick to repent. And after they've, you know, dumped on you, unbelievably, they'll usually come over and go, I'm so sorry, I just couldn't help myself. Can I make it up to you and take you out to dinner? I really love you, and give you a big hug. You know, they don't usually hold on to it again. They don't hold on to their anger either.
Right.
They just get it out and it's gone. Unfortunately, you are the dumping grounds. Now, if that would be a level 1.
Right.
If you happen to be a level 2, you're not nearly as good at dumping everything. So you dump fairly well, but you hold on to things as well.
I do.
And so people who are level 2s, I think you're actually level 3, honey, I'll talk to you about that. But level 2s are, things are starting to break down because they're not getting rid of toxins, so those toxins are there breaking down the tissue. So, anger affects the liver, and fear affects the kidney, and resentment affects the gallbladder, and, like that. Pancreas is affected by not having enough sweetness in life and being unfulfilled. And
which one is the gallbladder?
the gallbladder is resentment. So anyway, different organs are affected by those emotions. But then there's also just the physiological aspect of not getting rid of your toxins. So your blood gets toxic, and it affects your acid-alkaline balance, and it affects your oxygenation of your cells, and it affects the electricity in the cells, and all of that. So, basically what happens at level 2 is you're still functioning, but, you probably need more sleep. And you could be walking around tired a lot during the day because you don't have the electricity to give you the energy or the oxygen to give you the energy. And so everything's just not as good as it could be, but you're still okay. And you could get sick, and when you get sick, you probably will tend to be sick for, a week instead of 24 hours. And it may take you 2 or 3 weeks to get your energy back instead of, just popping right out of bed the next day and saying, God, I feel great. It's a wonderful day. Let's go to it. And you can actually be healthier if you're level 1 from having a high fever like that than you were before, because your whole body's been purged of toxins. Okay? And level 1 people can do intense detoxes that you may have heard about, like liver gallbladder flushes and things like that, because they're what I would call the goose compared to the canary. They can handle being knocked around by heavy-duty detoxes, whereas if you're a canary, you can't handle that. You're too delicate, and you could be so sick from that you never fully recover from doing an intense detox. So after level 2, we cross what's called the biological shishura, and we move into level 3. And the biological shishura talks about moving from functional problems, which number 2 is a functional problem, to moving to level 3, where the tissues are starting to break down. And that's where we start seeing the problems like hashimotots, and we can see type 2 diabetes, and we can see imbalances in the heart, and arrhythmias, and lots of anxieties and depressions, and all those sorts of things start showing up where the tissues are actually being attacked to some degree, or they're actually breaking down because there's too much toxin there for the body to be able to deal with it effectively, and it's staying in too long and breaking down the actual organ itself, making lesions. And number 4 is where the whole process has gotten so degenerated that the body is in full-blown degeneration. And, there's a process from what we call regulation to recycling. When your cells are healthy, they're regulating us. And they're, saying, well, some things always need to be in recycling because our cells red blood cells last 120 days. So what happens to those dead red blood cells? Well, if they weren't being recycled and pulled out of the system and broken down by different enzymes and things in our body, we would be bigger than houses. We wouldn't be getting rid of stuff, right? We would just keep building. So building is good, but to a degree. And breaking down is good, but to a degree. When what we're doing is recycling too much, then we're preparing ourselves to be broken down by the earth and fully recycled. So at the end of life, we're recycling. At the end of life, we're cold. Warmth is life, cold is death. And balance is life, and supportive of the whole process of regenerating and healing. So the interesting thing is it doesn't matter if you're in level 4, you can be moved to level 3, and from level 3 move to level 2, and from level 2 move to level 1. But it's the process of understanding where you are and what do we need to do. If you're in level 3, I'm sure as heck not going to give you some heavy-duty detox, because it could be, well, the way that I like to explain it to people is if the cells are blocked, if your cell membranes are like rock, and you want to try and get toxins out and nutrients in, it's not going to happen unless you can figure out how to open some of those doors to let them in. So if you have a big bag of trash and you want to throw it out, if you don't open the door and you throw it at the door, it's just going to stay at the door. Now, if you were at it long enough, and you put an anvil or something inside your bag of trash, you could throw the bag at the door and make a hole in the door and get the trash out. But then you have a hole in the door you have to mend. And if somebody's in level 3, you can't do a heavy-duty detox with them because you could be knocking a hole in the door. So that's really deeply understood by the Belgians, and they developed a whole system of drainage remedies, homeopathic drainage remedies, that are gentle, that help to open the door. And you do that in different degrees and in different ways based on where you are on that chart we're talking about. Dr. Rekowig also worked with a chart like that, but he had 8 different delineations.
That's very interesting.
So medical doctors don't think about any of this. They don't take the time to explore any of this. Their training has to do with how do we help people get rid of their symptoms, and what can we do that, they use metabolites basically, single substances, and they study that single substance on single cells. They don't look at what that single substance does to the whole person. That's where I'm at. What I want to know is what are we putting in there, and how does it affect the whole person? I'm not just interested in affecting your thyroid. I'm interested in upregulating your whole body so your body doesn't need to have a problem with the thyroid. Now, I'm not dumb about that either. I mean, I do know that our thyroid is right here and what's right above it, but our jaw, right? So one of the biggest contributing factors to thyroid problems is toxins from the mouth leaking down into the thyroid. So do you have silver amalgams in your mouth?
I do. I've been working on getting them removed.
Do you know there's a wonderful biological dentist in Ventura who's reasonable?
I don't know.
I think her clinic is called Ashwood Dentistry. And her first name, if I'm not mistaken, is Lori, and her last name is a wonderful Italian name, but I don't remember it. If you call me at the office, I'll give you her information.
Ashwood Dentistry. Okay.
Yeah, and she's right on Telegraph,
Okay.
not too far from Victoria. Probably about a mile from Victoria, heading towards Thompson. And anyway, she's very reasonable. She doesn't cost any more to work with her than it costs to work with a non-biological dentist, and her whole focus is on helping people get the mercury out of their mouths. But if you go to my website, I have a wonderful download from a biological dentist who I studied with, who has the most beautiful interactive charts that show each one of the teeth. And do you know about meridians, honey? Okay, so in Chinese medicine, for thousands of years, they've understood that we have these microvessels in the body that are filled with what they call qi. It's a substance of life, it's energy. We could call it electrical potential. That's what American science would understand. They actually, now that we have electron microscopes, are able to see them. But for for years and years and years, American people thought it was all nonsense, but now we see it. And there have been things that have been really shocking to Western doctors, where you can use a needle instead of using chemicals to anesthetize people and to put them out. And that's been used now for probably 30 years in the United States. It's that form of Chinese medicine. But you can do a tremendous amount of work by opening up blockages. That's one of the many descriptors of health, really, is to remove the blockages that prevent the energy from flowing. One of the things we talk about is if you can get circulation to an area, then your body can get blood there, and it can get lymph there, and it can move the fluids into the tissues and take the toxins and wash them out. But if you can't get the circulation to the tissue, it's gone. So anyway, every tooth it's like a circuit breaker to a different organ and muscle and bone. And so if you're interested, you can go on my website and pull up this fascinating chart of your teeth and click on the teeth that you're having problems with, and it'll tell you all the health problems that are associated with that tooth. And you probably have a root canal or a big problem with a tooth that's dealing with your thyroid.
Yeah, I have had root canals.
Mm-hmm.
I've had a couple, I believe. No, maybe I just had one.
Uh-huh. So I would also really encourage you to go to his website. It's called mydentistaz.com. AZ for Arizona, because he's in Arizona. And just read about what he has to say about root canals.
Okay.
There's also a fabulous book called The Root Canal Cover-Up. And it will help you to understand about why these are... Oh, honey, it's so much more than not good. It's devastating to the body because it's a huge topic for us to get into. Let's just put it like this. The root, the tubules, if you were to stretch them out, they're microscopic tubules, but the tubules that are connected to your tooth are hundreds of feet long. They're all swirled and whatnot together, but they're microscopic. When they do a root canal, they're usually doing it because there's an abscess or an infection in the tooth.
Right.
And sometimes you have a root canal like I did for falling on my tooth. There was no infection. I just fell on it and the tooth died. So instead of pulling the tooth, they got rid of the root, and it wasn't like it was infected. But there's other challenges, even when you don't have an infection in the tooth. And I'm eventually going to get my root canals fixed. I just don't have any problems with them because of the fact that they weren't started from an infection problem. But they use an antibiotic that they put into the tooth, but it only can get down a small amount into the jaw area. And then they put something in there called ganoperta, which is like a cement, which locks the infection into the tubule. And you have low-level infection dripping into your system, deeply affecting the meridian and the organ and the bone and the muscles that are taken care of by that tooth. So what I have found really in every single person that we've looked into this with who has cancer, that the cancer is always, the tooth that deals with the organ that they have the cancer in almost always has a root canal in it, or else has a deep level infection when somebody does a cavitat study on the tooth.
So if you need a root canal,
you don't ever need a root canal. It's just an option that the dentists have you do.
Okay, so what is the other option?
The other option is to pull the tooth.
Oh, okay.
And to put in, some type of an appliance. And the healthiest appliances are not to
like
use.
A bridge or implants or.
Implants are really not very good. And if you look at that website, you'll find out why. They're okay, but there are definitely much better options health-wise, and they're much less expensive to do these little dentures, honestly.
Dentures?
Yeah.
To wear dentures?
Well, it's a denture for the one tooth that you're replacing or something like that. Bridges can be done with a ceramic material rather than a metal material. The metals always create a big, big, big problem. And they're actually making bridges now out of zirconia. And they're doing implants with zirconia, so there's no metal in the mouth, which is really smart.
Okay, so metal is pretty much what you want to
Just
stay
like,
away from.
absolutely, because of what it does electrically to our body. And when you have mixed metals in your mouth, like if you have gold in some teeth and then,
It's silver on another.
yeah, so if you have both, then you really create major problems. So it could be as simple for you as getting your teeth taken care of properly. And honestly, honey, what it's really worth doing is going to Arizona and having Dr. Margolis work on you. Because he knows his stuff, and he has the cavitat materials, and he can do all the surgeries, and clean out all the old infection out of the roots, and he knows all of the European medicines, those homeopathics of the bacteria to clear out that stuff once and for all for you, and use ozone into the tooth and into the jaw and really do it right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I will look into his website.
Yeah, he's fabulous.
Okay.
Yeah. So that could be a big part of it, because if we can be doing everything right as far as diet and all the rest of it goes, but if you have a raging infection that's constantly dropping, bacteria, harmful infectious bacteria, pathogenic bacteria, into your jaw and into your thyroid, then it's going to make the job ever so much harder and maybe almost impossible. So, teeth are a very important part of the bigger picture.
Right. I've read that, yes.
It's very important. Yeah. Are there any other things that you wanted to talk about regarding this?
Let's see, what else do I want to talk about? Well, just primarily the gap, and your stories are very interesting. First time for me, hearing all this, it's very interesting. I like hearing all this. I just became really interested in my health when I started doing my research on Hashimoto's.
Right.
I was diagnosed 5 years ago, but I always just thought, okay, well, I'll just take the pill, and I was just going to take it forever and be fine.
Right.
That was my thinking.
Uh-huh.
But then I started getting symptoms, other symptoms, and doctors were not helping me.
Right.
I didn't feel they were
Harming you,
helping me
actually.
at all. They couldn't give me an answer.
Well, they don't know, honey. They just think it's just the thyroid. They don't realize how deeply our thyroids are affected by our liver function, by our blood sugar function.
Yes.
All these things are interrelated profoundly to what's going on with our thyroid. Our thyroid, the hormones are conjugated in the liver. So, if you're having a conjugation problem, so if you have a conjugation problem with your hormones, then your liver is going to be involved. And the hypothalamus, it has to do with the release of your TSH and the pituitary. So if you have problems with your pituitary and your hypothalamus in relationship to your thyroid, then that's going to be a big issue. And then the adrenal glands are deeply, connected to the thyroid. So they never put on their Sherlock Holmes hat to figure out, where the source of the problem is.
No, all they do is
They give you T3 and T4.
I just check my levels every 3 months, 3 to 6 months, and say, okay, your levels are a little high. Maybe we need to adjust your meds a little. Okay, they're low this time. We'll just have to, adjust your meds again. That's it.
And
But they don't treat my Hashimoto's.
No, and they don't treat you. They think they're treating your Hashimoto's, but they're just dealing with your thyroid numbers.
Right.
They're not dealing with you.
Right.
And they're not looking at why is this happening.
Right.
And on top of that, they're most likely throwing a synthetic form of thyroid at you,
Yes.
which is incredibly difficult for your body to recognize and to use properly.
That's what I'm on.
Syntheroid and Cytomel.
Levothyroxine, and I just got on Cytomel about probably 6-7 months ago.
Did it make a difference?
You know,
Some people do feel a lot better on Cytomel too, but
can't say.
they probably never even looked at a reverse T3 on you, or because they really don't know what they're doing. I work with an incredible alternative medical doctor who's really, really masterful with hormones, and it's amazing to me. There's something called T3 with tracers. They never do it, and that's really the most important number to look at. It's a free T3 and a free T4 with tracer, and they won't I mean, if you have insurance and your doctors will do blood work for you, I can give you a really fabulous panel for them to do, and we'll be able to tell so much more about what's going on for you. But the bottom line is, if we get your body back in balance, your thyroid's not going to be functioning crazy.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Yeah.
That would be very nice.
Because thyroid has so much to do with our emotional state and our energy state and,
Yes.
weight and all of that.
Yes. So I've been seeing an alternative doctor.
Who have you been seeing?
Well, he's in Woodland Hills.
Uh-huh.
I've been seeing him for almost a year now.
Who is it?
His name is Arthur Gazarian.
I haven't heard of him yet.
Yeah, he's.
Is he an MD?
No, he's an acupuncturist.
Oh, okay. So that's a little
But
different.
he also treats thyroid,
Uh-huh.
weight, and there's other issues that he focuses on.
Did he mention to you anything about Dr. Karamasian's book? Like something like, why are my thyroid
Yes.
levels perfect and I feel horrible?
Yes.
So-
In fact, he had the book in
Uh-huh.
his office, and he let me. A lot of his method is on this book, this particular book. The doctor,
Yeah.
he uses the same supplements.
I've been studying with Datis now for 20 years. Ever since he first started, I've done all of his
Amazing.
seminars.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I did purchase his book,
Uh-huh.
and the treatments that he used for his patients is the same.
You're doing
that
it.
Arthur, yeah.
So, honey, that's what we call functional medicine.
Yes.
And I'm trained in functional medicine, and it's still metabolite oriented.
Right.
And Datis is another one of those people who believes that you can never completely heal Hashimoto's. Once you have Hashimoto's, you have it for the rest of your life. I disagree
Is
with
that
him.
his belief?
Yeah.
Okay.
I completely disagree with him. However, if I want to know about biochemistry, I always go to Datis. So I have a real strong background in that work. I mean, I've done his thyroid seminar, which is a 4-day seminar, I think, 3 times. But it still is not the paradigm of healing. It's the paradigm of using natural substances to get the thyroid to behave. And you can get the thyroid to behave, but you're not going to get to the point where you're not taking supplements anymore for it by doing Datis's work. And if you read the book, you'll know he says that. And it's not my experience. People can actually heal their thyroid.
And that's what I read when I came across the GAPS book. That
Uh-huh.
you can
Heal it.
You can go into remission from whatever disease you have, whether it's chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's. So
Epilepsy,
Right.
everything.
Right. So that's why I am interested in trying the diet.
It's more than remission, honey. You can actually do, yes, you can actually have the C word. You just have to give your body long enough in a healthy frame and just stop doing things that are harmful to it. We just have to realize we are completely out of balance with nature. I mean, even the fact that we're sitting here right now under fluorescent tube lights and it's dark outside. Do you realize that we're designed to go to bed with the sun and get up with the sun? And our pineal gland, which is the master gland of our entire endocrine system, is being deeply affected by that. We're supposed to be sleeping right now. And because we're not, we're paying the price. And then the thyroid is affected by this very directly. The pineal is the master hormone gland.
Okay.
So, I mean, there's all sorts of things that we're doing that are just out of tune with nature. So the more we can do to put ourselves back in tune, the better. So understanding the natural rhythms, understanding that in nature, in the winter in most of the world, probably not in the Philippines, but in most of the world, it's really cold. And the days are quite short and the nights are quite long in the wintertime. And people tend to hibernate. And the only time when they really have a lot of carbohydrates available for them is towards, the end of summer and into fall. And people eat a lot of carbohydrates then, and they gain 20 pounds of fat, visceral fat, so that they can make it through the cold winter, so their bodies produce more heat, that they can sleep longer, so that they don't have to be out, and possibly survive what could be a famine type of situation in the winter and still be alive to face another spring. So that's the only time of year, though, that people tend to eat naturally, a lot of carbohydrate. The rest of the year, they're not available for Northern Europeans. Now, I don't know what the cycle of life is like in the Philippines. I'd have to study it more, but you probably have lots of coconut available all year long, and certain fruits at different times of the year, and sweeter fruits than almost anybody anywhere else in the world. Pineapples and mangoes and
lychees.
Oh, I love lychees. Oh. And I love passion fruit and soursop and sweet sop and all those sorts of things. I went to the tropics a few times. Avocados and all those sorts of things. Macadamia nuts, which are actually those are better than olive oil as far as being a monosaccharide. So, I mean, it's a really different kind of a diet, but still there was a lot of fish and I think wild boar in that diet and different birds in the diet. And
I came across this cookbook when I was at the library about a year ago. Nourishing Traditions.
Oh, it's fabulous! Yeah.
I checked it out.
It's the Weston Price.
Exactly. She's the founder for and that's how I
Sally
discovered
Fallon.
who Weston Price was. So I ate a lot of nuts, and she emphasized how much you should be soaking your nuts because you can't digest it unless you soak it. It sounds easy, and I've watched YouTubes on.
I do it all the time.
Do you?
I soak everything for a minimum of 3 days, and then I dehydrate them with Celtic sea salt.
Okay.
Now, she would usually soak it in Celtic sea salt water, but
Yes.
Celtic sea salt's expensive, and I don't want to lose it. Plus, I need the salt. I'm a low electrolyte person, so I'm supposed to eat salt, a lot of it. So I like to actually sprinkle it on the nuts and take it afterwards. But honestly, honey, I'm not eating nuts now because my imbalance says I don't need polyunsaturated fatty acids, I need sterols. So I'm eating coconut, and I'm eating butter, and I'm eating coconut oil like crazy.
So you cook the nuts?
Huh?
You cook the nuts?
I put them in a dehydrator.
Oh, okay.
So I soak them first for 3 days, and you have to rinse them 3 or 4 times a day. I rinse them in the morning 2 or 3 times when I first get up, and then I usually rinse them again in the evening a couple times. And the 3rd day, then I'll pour all the fluid off, rinse them a couple more times, salt them real well, and pop them in the
Now,
dehydrator.
is that with all nuts?
I do.
Almonds? Cashews?
Pecans. Cashews are not quite as important, but it's good to do with cashews too.
Walnuts?
Walnuts for sure, yeah. Some people say that the walnuts don't have that kind of an enzyme inhibitor on them like the other nuts do, because the way their shell is and something about their personal content itself. They're higher in protein, but they have a tendency to be a little on the bitter side, and there's something about the phytonutrients in the walnuts a little different, but I still soak them. I soak all of them. And I found that walnuts and pecans really, really need a lot of rinsing. So I tend to put each type of nut in a different bowl. And then I soak them for 3 days and then pop them in. I mix them together on the dehydrator sheets.
Yeah.
And then
I've seen the dehydrator, but they say you can use the oven.
You can use the oven on low. Yeah. Dehydrators are great, though, for so many reasons. Yeah. You can also make your yogurt in them. And
The dehydrator?
yeah, you just take all the sheets out and put your yogurt in and put it at a low temperature, and you'll keep your yogurt warm all night long that way.
Now, is that by using the cultures, the live cultures?
I have all the different. I have so many live cultures. I have them for raw milk, and I have them for, other milks. And I have kefir cultures, and I have water kefir for making coconut kefir. And, yeah.
I've heard all this.
And I make my own sauerkraut. And,
Yeah.
well, honey, also,
Sauerkraut's right, the fermented.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's all
in the gap, right?
It's all in the gap. It's all in the videos. I mean, really, they show you step by step how to do it all. You can literally have your computer open, watching the video while while you're making things, and pause it, and go back. And
Now, for the broth, is it where do you get your meats? Or your chickens?
Okay, so where do you live?
I live in Oxnard.
Oh, perfect. So, do you know where the farmers market is in the Hollywood Beach area?
Yes.
Okay.
I have been there once.
I walk there. That's how close I am to it.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and anyway, we go every Sunday. And at the very far end, there's somebody who brings the most fabulous natural meat there. And he's from the Siskiyou area up near Mount Shasta. And he has grass-fed beef that's just to die for. It's incredible. And he even brings down homemade beef jerky and summer sausage, and it's great. And bones for making your bone broth. I told him I'm going to be sending all these people to him, so he should definitely bring lots of bones for making the bone broth, and stew meat for people so they can make their soups. So he's bringing, oh my God, this last batch was just incredible. I mean, a bone that was this big had that much bone marrow. So it was just...
So it's every Sunday?
Every Sunday he's there, yeah. And you can get wonderful, pasture-raised eggs there. We used to have somebody bringing chickens, but we don't anymore. So there is also, I don't know what your financial situation's like, honey, but there's a service. I think it's called Farm Fresh. It should be a link to it on my website. And they actually will take orders of all the foods that you want and deliver it to your house every Wednesday. So they'll bring you raw milk, they'll bring you pasture-raised eggs, they'll bring you meat, but their meats are much more expensive because there's somebody who has a wonderful ranch that's up north of Santa Barbara, but I think his land is far more expensive than in the Siskiyous, and his meats are like twice as expensive as the ones at the farmer's market. Yeah. So I think it's really worthwhile to go there. Probably the chickens that I'm getting are not the best, but Costco has organic chicken. Okay. And I buy... Trader Joe's is not range. I don't think. Check and see. Okay. But do you belong to Costco or?
I do.
Yeah, they do have organic chicken there. Okay. You have to buy 2 at a time. But honestly, I go through chickens really fast because of the soup.
Okay, so organic and grain-free, that's what...
Well, you want them that are actually outside, pecking and all of that. You don't want them eating...
Like cooped up in a cage.
Yeah, and even organic is not... You have to check on the company and make sure that when they're saying organic, that the chickens are outside and they're not just eating organic feed in a hen house. Okay. It's really important.
And Whole Foods? Lassen's?
Lassen's will have them. Okay. And but again, I don't trust any of them anymore. I've really, really been shocked at some of the foods that they'll have at Lassen's and at Whole Foods and whatnot. So find out the name of the company who they're getting their chickens from, and then just check it out on the internet, and even call and talk to them and ask them how they raise their things. And if they're in the area, go visit them. It's kind of fun to go out to the farms. Yeah. One of my friends ran a farmer's market in Austin, and I used to go out with her to visit the farmers. Okay. It was really interesting.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So all of that is really good. And then there's also, I have access now to a co-op that, did you ever hear of Rossum and what happened with Rossum? Are you on the Weston A. Price Foundation email list or anything like that?
No.
Okay, well, it's really worth doing. You'll get so much valuable information. But one of the things that's been happening is this horrible political mess where this woman who was up in Santa Paula who had a wonderful farm that she was growing, wonderful chickens and had fresh eggs and fresh meat, and whole groups of children would come up to the farm and play with the goats and play with the, visit all the animals and see a real farm where people were really loving on and taking care of the animals properly and all that. She was in jail yesterday. They're just finding the stupidest things to try and destroy people who are doing, natural farms. So I found out about it the day after she was already, dealing with the court. But the people, I talk for the Weston A. Price Foundation from time to time, and so the woman who's the head of it in Ojai emailed me because this woman was just so shocked by the whole thing that she really went into shock, and she wanted a homeopathic remedy to help her because she really was like not even present. She was they just threw her in jail. It was awful. So just a really simple, sweet farm woman. I mean, my God.
She was doing illegal?
No, nothing's illegal that she did. They just trumped up a bunch of charges against her. And there's a co-op that was in Santa Monica called Rosslyn, which I belong to. And they shut them down. And she was one of the people that supplied them. And because of that, they went after her. And they weren't doing anything illegal at Rosslyn either. But one of the sources for their dairy was an Amish family outside of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So I have access now to all of his raw dairy products and cheese and stuff like that, which honestly is some of the best dairy I've ever had.
Yeah.
And in Austin, I got my raw milk from a bunch of Mennonite people, and that was totally incredible. For a while, they could just bring it to the farmer's market until they started having a fit about it there too. So anyway, there's a lot that's happening right now to try and stop us from having real food, and it's so crazy.
I've been reading a lot on GMOs.
Mm-hmm.
It's unbelievable what they're doing to our food.
Well, with the Weston A. Price Foundation, if you're interested, they can help you to find somebody, and they're doing big petitions right now.
Yeah, the campaign for labeling.
Yeah, so if you want to, spend an afternoon or something getting, sitting in front of one of the stores to get signatures, I'm sure they would love to have you help.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's called WAPFA, Weston A. Price Foundation Association, I think.
Okay.
WAPFA.com. And there's definitely a wonderful group out of Ojai,
Okay.
which is our Ventura County group. There's a
Right.
small one trying to form in Oxnard, but it hasn't been too successful yet. But
Right. And I know they're doing one in,
Simi Valley.
I believe LA area, somewhere around there.
I'm sure there is, but there's one in Simi Valley and there's one in Santa Barbara that's very active.
Okay.
I'm going to do a talk for the Santa Barbara one soon on gaps. So.
What is that?
I don't. Actually, call my office, and my office manager will tell you. I mean, it's in my book, but I don't know the date.
That's for the public, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be up in Santa Barbara. I did one for Ojai, and you heard the one from Austin.
Austin, right.